There's always variations in the hypocephali. This is the lesson. So for Charles Larson to pretend that he's suspicious of Joseph Smith because Joseph Smith restored something incorrectly, the assumption here is that there is only a correct standard way to draw a hypocephalus. But we know, based on the myriads of examples we have, and which I'm going to show you, we know that the hypocephali were drawn by individuals, for individuals. There is no singular standard hypocephalus. That is the only correct way to draw this, and if you deviate from that, then it's a fake. No, that's a modern anti-Mormon thinking. As with the archaeologists, as with the DNA scientists, so with the ancient Egyptians. If you're going to study them, you have to study the Egyptians and their interpretations of their own religion, and not put modern biases on it like Charles Larson does. In fact, he doesn't even tell you what the Egyptians believed at all. He doesn't even touch it. He doesn't show you any different hypocephalus, as I'm going to show you. The other very interesting restoration in this central panel that Joseph Smith had, besides the extra snake, putting the moon discs on the baboons correctly and all, is this hieroglyph right there. What is that? Is that just random? James Harris says no. This hieroglyph, as we break it apart, breaks into 3 different parts. And each one of those parts are significant based on how Joseph Smith interpreted this. This wasn't in the original hypocephalus in the Egyptian alphabet and grammar. So how and where and why would Joseph Smith get this kind of an idea and then put it together with the correct interpretation based on Egyptian and Egyptological analysis of this figure? Very interesting how he puts it all together here. So Charles Larson, in his book By His Own Hand Upon Papyrus, claimed he was suspicious of Joseph Smith's restorations in the hypocephalus and in facsimile number 1 and in facsimile number 3. He's one of those critics who contend Joseph Smith got nothing right. The sloppiness that Joseph Smith used to restore the damaged hypocephalus is supposed to be problematic. But is this sloppiness Joseph Smith's doing? Is it Reuben Hedlock's doing? Or is it the way the ancient Egyptians did it? Let's take a look at some more hypocephali and I'll show you. I think it's the ancient Egyptians' ideas. I think it's the way they drew their product. Now, when we compare other Egyptian hypocephali, we can see that these aren't exactly well done. You can barely make out this figure here, which is in the Walter Nash hypocephali, the 2-headed figure that was moved from the central panel up. But look at this figure. It's very incompletely drawn. We don't even almost know what that represents. What's this going on in the central panel here? What's this thing? What's this thing? It looks like a bunch of squiggles. This is supposed to represent a huge boat with someone in the boat. But can we distinguish those figures? It doesn't look very easy. I happen to know, based on my study of other hypocephali, that this is another boat, and in this circle is a scarab beetle. But would you be able to tell by the drawing? It's really rather sloppy. Some of the hieroglyphs here you can't even hardly see, let alone read. Look at the rim here. This is smudged and beat up. The spacing is rather uneven. It's really, really tight up here, sort of loose around this side and end. Look at over here. There's a whole bunch of smudges on this one. This is thicker written here. The spacing is not all the same. Notice, though, this one also. There's no central panel. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different compartments or so. This one only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different compartments. So the number of compartments differ as well. But can you read the hieroglyphics here and the writing? It's rather sloppily done. It's the same sort of sloppiness that's in the Joseph Smith hypocephalus. Let's look at another example real quick. I'm going to do the rookie thing and change it out real fast for you. Notice this. Yet again another hypocephalus that has, this is really rather difficultly drawn, but it's got 6 different baboons. All the moon discs are on their heads, that's true. Instead of 8, sometimes it has 2, sometimes some hypocephali have 4, sometimes 6, sometimes 8. But some of this writing up here is a little, as opposed to down here, is a lot better evenly spaced, and it's kind of cramped here. It's really cramped down here at the bottom. You can't hardly make out what this figure is holding here, presenting it to this figure here. It is upside down, of course, because the bottom half is the female element, and the top half is the male solar element. But as far as reading the hieroglyphs in this thing, it's next to impossible to do also. So this idea of saying Joseph Smith was sloppy, therefore he was careless, well, we can see the engraving here is really rather halfway decent, and in the same relation with other hypocephali. So that's rather a desperate argument, is what I'm trying to say, when we look at the other evidence, something Charles Larson and many, many critics against the facsimiles simply will not do. Now, here's another example of what I was saying about different hypocephalists and how they vary and differ among themselves. Look at this one. This entire upper third of this hypocephalus is nothing but a ship with a hawk with outstretched wings. Here there's no central panel with a four-headed deity. This almost looks like a little spaceship man. It's not. It's a figure with a wedge-out eye as a head. This is not an alien spaceship, I promise. And then there's a snake bird-like figure here, supposedly doing something with a figure who's obviously sitting. You can see part of the leg here and part of the throne. And of course this is the great cow. And then this third of the panel is upside down. And now we see this is our seated figure. You can see his two knees here and then the four-headed aspect here. But he's on the upside down part of the hypocephalus, or the right side up part, depending on which way you hold it. But this is a completely different look than, say, this hypocephalus. Now this hypocephalus is really detailed. We can see the central panel here, and he's got a huge crown, this four-headed deity. But how many panels are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 22 panels in this one. I mean, the number of panels is way different. There's a lot more to it. It obviously has much more hieroglyphic writing in it than this one, which has absolutely no hieroglyphic writing in it. What about this one? Comparing this one. This one also has very little hieroglyphic writing in it. Around the rim it does. But notice this. This entire panel is nothing but a great big long ship with all kinds of different inhabitants in the ship. Here's our familiar four-headed seated deity with the ram's horns. But notice he only has 2, 3, 4 baboons. And they're not wearing the moon discs. These baboons are not wearing the moon discs. But some facsimiles have 2, 4, this one has 4, some have 6, some have 8 baboons. The numbers differ. This is a ship, that's true in this quadrant, but it looks like some sort of a building with a bird sitting on top of the building. And on this side is the ship with the spread out wings of the figure. So this is really interesting how the things vary. That's what I want you to notice. And then this one is a damaged hypocephalus. Hard to see a lot in this one. We do have the four-headed deity with the magnificent crown with the dowel cross and the 2 baboons. See, this one only has 2. The last one had 4. I've shown you one with 8. And then the figure up here with the Wepawawet staff that I'll get to. But this one has a lot more hieroglyphic writing, and this one has 2 boats on this side and a 3rd boat here. And then, of course, the 4 sons of horse here with the Hathor cow. And then there's a lion and some kind of a bull and some kind of a bee or something like that on this side with the hieroglyphics. So each hypocephalus is fundamentally unique.